Good morning, everybody. Today, we are going to be talking about a function we call the reciprocal function. So the reciprocal, that's a word that you might remember hearing in junior high or earlier. A reciprocal is a number that you times another number by to get 1. So imagine if you want to times 2 by something to get 1, you would times it by 1/2. Okay, so that would equal 1. If you want to times 3 by something, that would equal 1. You would times it by 1/3. And so this idea of taking any number x and timesing it by its reciprocal 1 over x to get 1 is where the name of this function comes from. So this function, f of x equals 1 over x, is called the reciprocal function. Okay, and before we start talking about this in detail, there's some things I want to point out about it. Number one, this function is undefined when x equals 0. Which makes sense if you think about it in terms of reciprocals, because what we're trying to do is say that 0 times something equals 1. Well, 0 times anything is always 0, so this thing that should be 1 over 0 doesn't exist. So trying to say 1 divided by 0, which is the thing we would times 0 by to get 1, equals a number, there isn't really any number that would work for. So when your teacher told you you can't divide by 0, that's why. Another thing we want you to notice is that we're going to have a lot of fractional outputs when x is a whole number. So if you put in nice things like 2, 3, 4, we're going to get out fractions like 1/2, 1/3, 1/4, and so on. So if you're a little worried about fractions, that's okay. Part of this chapter is to help us remember all those things about fractions that we've probably forgotten. So hopefully by the end of this unit, you'll feel much more comfortable with fractions than you do right now. So keep that in mind. And also, remember this idea of reciprocal. This is the number that we would multiply x by to get 1. Okay, so we're ready to start. We're going to try and make sense of this function by putting it into some context. Okay, so our context is the lottery. Okay, so imagine that you won the lottery and you were given one big pot of money. Now, of course, you would want to share that money with some friends and some family. So how would you split that money up? Okay, if you split the money evenly between yourself and one friend, what would each person's share of the prize money be? Now, we're not worried about the actual amount of money. Okay, it doesn't matter. What we're wondering is, if we think of the money as one big giant pot of money, how much do we each get if me and my friend, or you and your friend, whoever wins this lottery, if we split it up? Okay, so the answer to that would be 1/2. If there's 2 people, we each would get half of the money. Now, when you type that in, it's going to tell you that that equals 0.5. That's the decimal version of this fraction. So we're just going to enter in the fraction. It'll tell us the decimal. That's nice to know because some of us feel more comfortable with decimals than fractions. But just know they're the same thing. Next question. What if 3 people share the prize money? What would each person's share be? So if you had 3 people and you chop that pot up into equal shares, we would each get 1/3. Which when you type that in, it'll give you that is equal to 0.33333, and the threes just keep going. Okay, all you need to type in is the 1/3. Okay, so moving on. Okay, we're going to try and model this situation with a table and a graph. And what we're going to do is we're going to think about the number of people that we're sharing the money with and the size of each share. Okay, so we're going to have our input be the number of people and our output be the size of the share. So down here I've graphed on the x-axis represents the number of people, the y-axis represents the size of the share, and you can see the first two have been done for me, so we did those already. If there's 2 people, the share is 1/2. So 2 people, we're going to have a share of 1/2. They put a point there. If there's 3 people, the share will be 1/3. 3 people, the share will be 1/3. Okay, so hopefully you're starting to see why this model would be the function f of x equals 1 over x, because we're basically taking the x values for our input and writing them as 1 over x for our output. Okay, so go ahead and fill in the rest of this table, and it'll generate the points over here automatically for you. You can use the check button to see if you are correct. So if your points match up with the correct points, and we will see you at the end of the lesson.